Hello everybody, a very hairy Paradox 2767 here, back again, talking tonight about a little game called Dungeons & Dragons. Last Sunday marked the very first session between me, my wife Veronica, and our friends Taylor, Tyler, and Graham. Of the five of us, only Graham had ever played the game in the past, and even he was stepping into a new pair of boots by playing as our Dungeon Master. After all the fun we had, I thought I'd share the new hobby with you. I wanted to talk about a few things you'll need to play yourself, then one big bit of advice that you should follow when getting into D&D. And as we go, I'll talk a little bit about last Sunday's session for you to see if the game sounds like something you'd be interested in. Seeing as how I'm kind of new to the game myself, I thought I'd be able to offer a new perspective. Now, every game consists of any amount of players and a DM or Dungeon Master, whose job is to paint the scene, imagine obstacles for the rest of us to overcome, and to make any decisions for any non-playable characters, or NPCs. And if that term sounds familiar, NPCs, it's probably from some of the role-playing video games you've played in the past, like Zelda or The Witcher, because a lot of that role-playing terminology comes from the OG RPG, D&D. The first thing you'll need to play the game is to gather all of your materials. Most importantly, you'll need a full set of dice. There's a 20-sided, a 12-sided, a 10-sided, or two 10-sideds for a 100-sided, an 8-sided, a 6-sided, which is probably the most familiar sided kind of dice, and lastly a 4-sided. Each of these dice is referred to by D, then the number of sides that they contain, so this would be a D20 or a D12 and so on. Luckily for us, and hopefully for you too, our DM or Dungeon Master, Graham, had a full set of dice waiting ready to play with. You'll use these dice throughout the game to see if you can successfully complete actions. For instance, let's say you want to charm a bartender to get some information out of him. Your DM might have you roll a D20 for charisma to see if it's a success. And if you're anything like my little ugly gnome self, you'll have absolutely zero luck in charming any of the bartenders or people you meet throughout your adventure. Besides the dice, you'll want to get your hands on a player's handbook, a Dungeon Master's guide, and a monster manual. They're kind of like your ordinary set of rule books, only they've got like hundreds of pages each and they're hardcover. But just take a deep breath because you've got this. Maybe your DM already has these materials. Ours only had a set of rules for E2, or the second edition. So last Saturday, me and Veronica went to the mall and picked up a full set of E5, the latest edition of these books. The books came in a neat little box set situation, which included a kind of like cheat sheet DM screen for Graham to reference during play. I should warn you the expensive side though. The set of 3 books plus the DM screen set us back about $170. If you buy a lot of board games new or a lot of books new, this might not come as too much of a shock, but if you have more time than we did to prepare for your session, try Mercari or eBay for a used set. Besides that, I've heard that D&D also puts out these little starter sets that you can look into for like $20 each. They're a lot simpler and a lot easier way to get into the game. For us, we just decided to jump into the standard edition because we wanted to see what it was all about, and we wanted to have a little bit more freedom to decide where our adventure would go in the future. Now, those prepackaged sort of starter sets, I think they assign you your characters, which each their own characteristics. But if you're going with the standard set of rules, check out the back of the book, of the player's handbook, to find the blank character sheet you'll need to play. You're going to want to photocopy enough copies of these for each player to have their own, not including the DM. So that's exactly what I did, and I've got them color-coded for simplicity and for attractiveness, basically. You're going to want to fill these out come game night, so go ahead and grab a bunch of pencils for everyone to use, plus some scrap paper while you're at it. And that about does it for what you're going to need. Some dice, the player sheets, the rule books, some scrap paper and pencils, and you're good to go. Using little figurines, official or otherwise, is optional. We happen to, just because it was a good way for us to like imagine what kind of characters would want to be, but that's totally up to you. There's also some Dungeons & Dragons specific maps and mats you can use, all that totally optional. The first thing we did on Sunday was to come up with our own characters, so that includes their name, their race, their class, and we were doing all of this while Graham was familiarizing himself with the Dungeon Master's Guide. Taylor became the rogue, noble, moon-high elf Yavanna, Tyler the dragonborn paladin, ex-general Coldrick, Veronica the noble druid tiefling bird person King Alcedinidae, and I the feisty fighting former rock gnome Perilyn, or Pint for short, who rides around on his fiancé turned giant praying mantis. The mantis and the bird person species aren't officially part of the rules, but our DM let us run with it. Next, we did our best to fill in the character sheets, kind of quickly too because we wanted to get to the fun part. As we were just starting out, we didn't worry too much about learning the little details like the rules of casting magic or our character's personality traits, and actually that's for me the one biggest takeaway I want to leave you with. When you're first starting with D&D, it's easy to let yourself get bogged down by the rules, but try not to let this happen. What's important is that you're having fun and you're learning as you go. For example, I, as a gnome, am technically too small to use a battle axe. However, last Sunday I was doing that a lot and having a blast. Moving forward, I might switch to a hand axe so it makes more logical sense, but the point is, we weren't too worried about that sort of thing because we were having fun with the scenario. You too will get more familiar with the rules as your campaign progresses, and with bite-sized questions that you can ask of the player's guide or of the internet between those sessions. Graham's been poring over the DM's guide and the monster manual in preparation for next Sunday. I've been doing the same with the player's handbook and the YouTube, and it's actually pretty fun to get to know all the different little rules and intricacies of the game. Even as early as last Sunday night and into the early hours of Monday, believe me, I was getting really familiar with how to make these player sheets, and I was checking over everyone's to make sure that we'd done it correctly. I believe we all actually had our hit point max listed incorrectly as being too low. We all had more hit points than we realized, which is really important because we can take more damage than we originally thought. So getting more familiar with the rules, we can adjust how we play, and it can get more and more fun as we increase our expertise. When I was filling in those character sheets, I really leaned into a video by WASD20, and I think you should too, because that dude's got a ton of great beginner D&D stuff, and like the most invaluable thing on his channel is definitely filling in these character sheets. Basically, all you need to know is your character's class, race, their background, then you roll a d20 6 times, and that fills in like 95% of the sheet. It just takes a little bit of patience and stick-to-itiveness. Like I said though, definitely reference that WASD20 channel. I also like to cross-reference that channel with other YouTube channels because that sort of cements a lot of these ideas in my mind, and then other channels also have more information on more specific game mechanics. Depending on your DM's level of expertise, they'll also be able to answer a lot of your questions come game night, or they'll be able to make it up on the fly, which is also totally valid. Afterwards, everyone can reference rulebooks and see how they can adjust their playing in the future. Again, that's the whole point. None of us played strictly by the book last Sunday, and we still had a ton of fun, even though our adventure has only just begun. We found ourselves in a crowded bar in a town run on gambling, and we decided after meeting each other to find out who was behind it all. On a bartender's advice, we knew that the big man lived upstairs. Pragmatic Yavanna flirted her way to the restricted second floor, while Coldrick sneakily followed to try and strike a deal with the man they sought. Meanwhile, an unwitting King Elsadinide and I decided to simply bring the man to us, hacking away at a support being to bring the whole bar crashing down. If that scenario sounds at all fun, I think you'd really enjoy exploring what D&D has to offer. Like a lot of other advice givers out there, I'll encourage you to show up to game night with an open mind. You might leave surprised. If anyone else out there has recently played D&D for the first time, I'd love to hear about your experience below. Until then, thanks for your time and have a great rest of your night. A 20-sided die, 12-sided, a 20-sided die, a 12-sided, a 10, or with 2 of them, oh Jesus, tits. Holy fuck.